We are live. All right. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining our program today. The topic today is Conquer Imposter Syndrome to achieve your potential. And I thought that this would be a really timely topic because it's the beginning of the year and we make
Mhm.
decisions about new things we want to do. We want to kick off new projects, develop relationships with new people, start some new good habits, and sometimes that's really scary. And we can talk ourselves right out of it. We can decide that wasn't really a good idea. It probably wasn't going to be successful. So we choose not to step out of our comfort zone. So I am really happy that we're talking about this today. And I'm so glad that you're here. And I'm Michelle Beauchamp. Let me introduce myself. My company is called The Champ Group, where I partner with companies and their teams to equip them in leadership and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And guests, thank you so much for joining. We want to ask you to be sure in the comment section, let us know that you're here. Plug in your name, and so we can give you a shout out and recognize that you're here to join us today. We had so many people register for this event, super exciting, with lots of different industries too. So this topic of imposter syndrome, that darn imposter monster, it's real. We really, really thank you for that. And then as we go through the program, too, guests, we want to ask you, feel free, put comments in, put questions in, and we'll address them as we go through the program. I want to introduce you to our special guest, Ashi Aurora. Ashi, I am
Hello.
so honored that you agreed to talk with us today and share your knowledge and wisdom about this important subject. So let me ask you now, help us understand, what do you do? What do you do, Ashi? Tell me what you do. Let the audience understand because they're going to appreciate that you're here with us.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for that great intro. Welcome, everyone. Wow, we're getting so many people out in the comments. Thank you for telling us where all you're tuning in from. So, yeah,
Super
everyone, I'm
excited.
Ashi Aurora with iRise Executive Coaching. So, I am a leadership coach and I primarily work with professionals who are struggling with imposter syndrome. It's about 80% of my clientele identifies with imposter syndrome, and it's getting in their way of having the work and the life that they want and that they want to be doing really well at. And it's something that I have had a lot of experience personally with myself over the years. And
Okay.
that's why I'm here to try to help inform anyone and everyone about this really important topic, because chances are, whether you can relate to these feelings, you at least know someone else who's dealt with it, maybe even struggled with it. And so I think it's a really important topic, and the timing couldn't have been better, like you said, Michelle, right at the beginning of the year when there's transition, right? And we're trying to create some transitions maybe in our lives as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Ashi. And we do have a lot of people showing up. Emily said she's a first year medical student, first gen Latina, and that's why she's here. Awesome. Phyllis said she's coming to us from Mission Viejo, Torrance, California. We have somebody here from Las Vegas. So this is so exciting. We are so glad everybody's here. And Ashi, you have so much to offer. And speaking of imposter syndrome, I've been doing these LinkedIn lives now for about a year. I started last January, and the imposter
Wow.
monster was starting to creep in. Like, people won't show up and all that. But you know what? Here we are. So I'm really glad
A
I didn't
year
let that.
later.
You know what?
Congratulations on your 1 year anniversary of doing these.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. And I think that, like we said, we have a lot of people from a lot of different industries who signed in today. And it's relevant no matter what we do. For example, I was thinking about, if you're in sales, then you start thinking, oh, my client's going to realize I don't have all the answers. They're not going to keep being my client. Or if you just got a promotion, you might say, oh, they did promote me. They believed in me, but
Totally.
you know what? They're
Yeah.
going to feel like, they're going to find out that I don't really know everything. Or if you're a business owner, you might say, my clients, I don't know if they're going to keep trusting me. So, no matter the industry, we have, as you said, imposter syndrome. In my business, what I do, Ashi, is professional and personal development. And, I work with them on goal setting, and we talk about the importance of choosing one word, which you and I talked about before. Your word is, what's your word for the year?
My word of the year is contentment. And I
Right.
love having a word of the year because I feel like it helps ground you and focus you into like whatever's going on. You kind of come back to that word. It
Mhm.
gives you a sense of lightness, of happiness. And I am so grateful, so blessed, feel that my work and my life is all in the right balance that I want it to be. I feel very
Mhm.
contented. And so that's my word of the year. What about yours, Michelle?
I love that though, because it's going to keep you grounded. And you know what? You're going to continue to be content because you're going to remind yourself that you've already experienced it and you know what it feels like. My word is shine because
Yeah.
I am so committed to help people grow and become their best selves, to help them shine. And I want to make sure too that I'm using the right words and around the right people because I want to make sure that the light within me shines out. So we love that. And I teach people that. And we talk about the importance of affirmations and that. But you know what I find, Ashi? Still, yet still, there is something about the imposter monster. So I want to ask you to
Mhm.
help us understand on a broad scope, what is imposter syndrome?
So, imposter syndrome is a condition where there are feelings associated with being like or thinking about yourself as a fake, a phony, an
Mm,
imposter, and
mm,
having this concern that someone's going to figure out, someone's going to notice that you're not as great as others think you are. People who associate with imposter syndrome feel like their accomplishments, achievements, accolades are not because of the work they've done. It's because
mhm,
of the work someone else has done that maybe
mhm,
they're kind of taking credit for, or it's because of luck rather than skill. And
mm,
so there's a lot of that negative self talk that even though there's validation, even though there might be validation from others, and for showing like all of these different achievements that's happening in one's life, they still don't believe it. They don't connect with it. They don't think it's right, and they really are worried that they're going to be they're going to be noticed for not being this real genuine person who really did all this great stuff to get those accolades that are coming to them.
mhm.
It's not a disease state. It's not like anxiety or depression.
Okay,
So
that's good
there's,
clarification.
yeah, there's, you can, some people, it plagues them a lot. For others, not so much. Maybe it shows up, like you mentioned, some of the examples, like during transitions, trying something new at the beginning of the year, as you're starting in something new, especially when we're not like, we don't feel as maybe knowledgeable about a certain area or a certain
Mhm,
topic and we're diving into it, or we've
mhm,
got a new team that we're working with. I mean, that, where
mhm,
we're trying to create those connections. So there's a lot of different instances where it can show up, but for some, like it plagues them all the time. It's showing up
mm, mhm,
constantly,
mhm.
and so yeah,
And see, and so I really appreciate too. You said it's not really like anxiety; it's not a disease, right?
yeah,
So what it is us figuring out why we don't deserve what we've got, and part of it, it
yeah,
sounds like to me, right? It's a deserve level. I showed some of the comments too as you were talking, and oh, there's an applause there, and I don't know if you saw Marianne said Ashi is special, and so we've got some good engagement here. So really thank you, audience,
yeah.
for the
Thank
engagement
you.
that you're providing. So Ashi, you mentioned before that there are levels of imposter syndrome. So can you talk a little bit about how many levels are there and how do we know what level we're at? Tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So typically there are about four different levels.
Okay.
So there's mild,
Mhm.
moderate, frequent, and severe.
Mm,
So mild is kind of the level where it's showing up at certain points, or you're recognizing that you're kind of processing it, you're cycling through it, but you kind of know how to manage it. Like you
okay.
see it, it's coming at you and you're like feeling it and you're like, okay, this is happening to me right now. And I'll give you an example. So
Okay.
and actually, before I launch into the example, let me explain the imposter monster. So, the
Okay.
imposter monster is this voice in my head. It's a character, and it
Okay.
sits right here on my shoulder. And I'm
Hmm.
sure most of you can relate if you've ever felt like you've got this negative voice inside you saying you're not good enough. They're going to figure out you're a fake or a
Hmm.
phony. What are
Right.
you doing here? And that imposter monster has grown from a place of protection. It tried to protect you. And I'm not
Mm,
going to go too far into like what happens in your childhood can,
okay.
create that monster, but there may be elements of that. And so that monster, you can choose for it to be small or really large. And so I still
Mm, you
have it.
can
I
choose that.
still,
Let me get. You can choose
yeah,
to be.
it's a
Oh, how do you
choice.
choose?
It's a choice. It's a choice.
Okay.
And when we get to the ways to overcome it, we'll talk about, how you can be empowered and be in that driver's seat of going through it, getting over it, and understanding how to really control it. And
Okay.
so, yeah, like Phyllis just mentioned here, hers is green and it's her fear monster.
Right.
And I love that. And, making it a bit comical is actually helpful because
Okay.
I have this one blog I wrote about how my daughter actually drew it out. And it ended up being like a cartoon character, and it was the anger character in this movie Inside Out, and the character that was in her head. And it's like, it's actually quite funny when I think about it, and I'm like, oh well, if it's funny when I think about it, then maybe I don't have to give too much credence to it or give it too much
Okay.
time or attention.
Hmm.
So that's the mild one. The mild one will show up usually when I'm trying something new. So I cycled through it, right when you first asked me to do this event. I'm like, this is my first LinkedIn event, I think, LinkedIn event live that I'm doing. I've done a few other live events, but not through LinkedIn. And it started talking to me a little bit like, why did Michelle choose you? Why do you think you're the expert in this?
Yeah.
Why should anyone listen in to hear
Okay.
you speak about it? And I combated that voice. I do a lot of practice of journaling. And so I wrote it down. I wrote down what it was telling me. And I wrote down answers for it, which were, I've worked with Michelle. I've been on client engagements with her. I know
Hmm.
Michelle. Michelle knows me. She knows that I can speak well to this topic.
Right.
I've done live
100%.
events before. I can present. I present across the country on this topic. I've done it numerous times. And third, hell yeah, I'm the expert in it because
All
I've
right.
been through it. I've been
All
through
right.
it. I've been going through it for years,
Oh yeah.
I
I'm
have
qualified to talk
firsthand
about this.
experience. And so I don't have to be perfect to be an expert. I can speak to it. Everybody has their own experiences and their own knowledge about it. So, all right. So that's mild. Okay.
Okay. I love those
Now,
examples.
yeah, moderate and frequent. And now we're getting a little bit more, right? So, depending on, and the way you can identify this, I'll tell you in a second as I go through the levels. So, moderate, it's happening, you're noticing it, it's coming up enough for you where it's getting in the way of something. And
Mm,
frequent is it's getting in the way of a lot of things, right?
mm,
And then severe, the highest level, is where we're getting into modes of anxiety and depression. Now we're getting to some clinical diagnoses that are either causing the imposter syndrome, or worse, the imposter syndrome is causing the anxiety or depression.
mm.
And so that gets a little bit, that gets much deeper. I would say level one is where there are a lot of tactics you can do yourself to kind of get through it. Levels 2 and 3 are where coaching really jams. And then level 4 is where therapy needs to,
Mm.
that's probably a better avenue to go
Okay.
through. Yeah.
I want to show you a couple comments here
Yeah.
from Frida Freeman. Hey, Frida, often the first Black
Yeah.
female reporter editor hired at newspapers I've worked at in the past. I've often
Yeah.
experienced imposter syndrome, feeling like I had to represent and wondered, was I there because of my skills and professional experience or a
Oh,
token? Yeah,
oh, Rita.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I can relate as a woman of color, and also getting into executive roles for the first time, often for the first time in the company's history, and sometimes also being there wondering like, are they just putting me in here to fulfill a quota to create, the diversity leg, or, and
Hmm.
it's a reminder of like, no, wait a minute, this is what I've done to achieve and get there. And we'll get
Right.
into a little bit more of that, but thank you
Okay.
for sharing that, Frida. That's
Yeah,
really,
thank you. So here's a question. Here's something we were going to talk about. How does this
yeah.
relate to self-confidence? And then I see that we had a comment here from
Mark. Hi, Mark.
Oh, tell that imposter syndrome meeting is over. Exactly. Don't schedule another one. We're not having a meeting. And
I
here's
love
something
it.
interesting too. So, what's the difference between low self-esteem, confidence, and imposter syndrome? So, wow, I love the engagement, audience. Thank you so much. These are great questions. So,
Yeah.
that takes us right into what we're going to talk about in terms of self-confidence, Ashi. So, talk with us
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
Yeah. I do believe there's a correlation. I think there's different spectrums, but I do believe there's definitely a correlation there. People who have that level of self-confidence. Now, this is not us seeing someone being confident. Okay. This is an internal thing where people have to identify with, I really have that self-assurance in myself, and what I'm doing
Hmm.
is the right way to go. It's
Hmm.
moving me forward. I'm earning these achievements based on the work that I'm doing, and
Okay.
I really have that self assurance that I feel that way, right?
Hmm.
So now, if we've got this imposter monster sitting on our shoulders saying, "No, no, no, it's not you, it's someone else,"
Hmm.
it's kind of trying to separate you from that voice and saying, "Okay, let me listen to that voice to see, is there any real credence here, or is this really
Okay.
getting in my way of where I want to go?"
Okay.
What are your thoughts on it,
We can
Michelle?
use it as a guide. It sounds like we can use it as a guide to determine. I mean, because I love how you went through the examples about when I invited you to come into this LinkedIn. You said, well, you went through the facts and you justified that in fact you were the right person, and you said, hell yeah, I can do this. So it sounds like, if we take a look at the experience that we have and we stay confident, then like the comment before, get out of here, imposter syndrome. I'm not having a meeting with you. We're done, right? So to me, it sounds like if we take a look at what we already experienced and successfully accomplished, and this is about achieving our potential, then we can remove that imposter monster. So that makes sense to me. Let me ask you
Yeah.
this. I'm curious. Oh, you have something else to say about that before we go to
Well, and
this
I
next?
think we'll get into this a little bit more, but a lot of the strategies around conquering it and achieving your potential are going to be related to confidence building.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I have found that confidence building strategies, tools, and techniques have worked best with my clients for them
Okay.
to really cycle through and process and take that level 2, 3 of imposter like feelings down to level 1, and most times level
Okay.
0.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to ask you this, and then I'm going to go to the next one where we can give people
Yeah.
guidelines. By the way, we had a couple comments that breaking down those levels was very helpful. So
Okay.
here's a question that I wonder about too, like demographics.
Yeah.
Does imposter syndrome affect certain demographics more than others? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, for sure. And the research, especially in the US, shows that it definitely affects women more, minorities more.
Hmm.
The age demographic, that's a really interesting one. And I think some of that may be a little bit sector specific. And what I'll do is, the example there, I'll give the healthcare example, and
Okay.
especially for physicians. I work with a number of physicians. My
Mhm.
husband, my parents are physicians. A lot of my healthcare administrative background before I went into executive coaching full time was all working around a lot of physicians, and we find a lot of that imposter like feeling. I know that one of the medical students that was listening in, like you see it at the younger stages,
Okay.
because what happens in the field of medicine especially is, even to get into medical school, you're at the top of your class in high school. Even in elementary, you're like, academically, your IQ is probably really
Right.
high,
Hmm.
and you're getting into great colleges, and then you're excelling in your undergrad, and you get to medical school, and now everyone is like you, and you're
Hmm.
like, wait a minute. And then you're in training, and a lot of training programs, and academic medicine hasn't caught up enough as some of the other sectors have to this. They're like looking at you like you don't know anything, and it's rough. There's a lot of hazing that goes on in that teaching
Oh.
environment, whether it's intentional or not. That all leads into like making you feel not worthy, not deserving, not smart enough, not hardworking enough to be in the environment you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And then add that onto certain things like, the 80-hour work week rule. So medical residents and physicians in training cannot be allowed to be working more than 80 hours a week. When that rule came about, I mean, you've got people in medicine in some of the higher age demographics saying, hey, those young people aren't working hard enough. And we see this even in other sectors,
Yeah,
right?
oh, for
Like,
sure.
oh, the
Absolutely.
millennials don't work hard enough. They want work-life balance. They want to leave at 5 p.m.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So now you start creating non-inclusive environments and have this
Okay.
kind of banter and talk going around. And I know this is your jam. You know what I'm saying here.
Biases start coming up.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of this can start leading to that negative self-talk because you're in an environment that's making you feel like you're not supposed to be there, or you're not good enough to be there.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. That I appreciate you saying that. I'm going to take us to this now too, because I think it's time for us to. We've got the levels. It's interesting to me too when you talk about physicians, and all of a sudden they're in a room where everybody else was stud and star like they were. So then the imposter syndrome comes back. So I'm sure everybody on this call today wants to understand, because what I hear you saying. I mean, you said 80% of your clients, this is what you work with them on, right? So we all experience it. So how do we minimize it or eliminate it? Help us understand that, Ashi, because that's going to be a really good takeaway.
Yeah.
Um,
So there's a lot of different ways to go about answering this question. So I'm going to start with kind of a 50-foot level, which is
okay.
mindset. So based
Okay.
on Carol Dweck's work, she's a positive psychologist and wrote this book called Mindset. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it.
Who wrote it
And
again?
Carol Dweck, D
Oh
W
yeah,
E
yeah, yeah,
K.
yeah. Duet, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And Carol Dweck's work is looking at taking us from the fixed mindset to the growth mindset.
Right.
And I also equate that from going from the negative to the positive, from the weakness focus to the strengths based mindset. And
Okay.
that's going to take me to my next point. So, what
Okay.
is mindset, real quick? Mindset is a collection of thoughts, attitude that affect your behavior, the actions you take, and essentially the results and outcomes. So if you look at this as a spectrum, that the way you think, the attitude you have about yourself and that around you is going to all the way affect the outcomes that are going to come out for you in your
Absolutely.
life.
You get what you focus on, in other words.
Yep, exactly. So if you are going to let that imposter monster keep cycling and keep telling you you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you're not meant to be here, you're not deserving, guess what? You're going to probably sabotage certain things in your life,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to lead to having those bad thoughts, which are going to lead to those actions, which are going to lead to those results and outcomes that you don't want. It's like the opposite of what you really want.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I
I'm going to
wonder.
break here because, yeah, Emily's writing something here really
Mm-hmm.
powerful. See,
Mm-hmm. I
um,
question dropping out of medical school very often, like thinking when I come to my board exams next year, I'll find out I couldn't pass, and then the risk of the hundreds of thousands of dollars has been spent, and I'll get kicked out of it and have overwhelming costs and nothing to show for it.
oh,
Um, I know. And then here's another one.
it's unfair, Emily.
Marianne said, yeah, part on of hazing in grad school or elite corp jobs is an attempt by peers to thin the herd. Ooh, and weed
Wow.
out weaker links. So I wanted to throw those comments in here. There's such good engagement. Again, audience, we really appreciate that. Um,
And I love how the
so
audience is also saying, hey, Emily, you're going to kill those exams.
I know support.
You
Ooh,
are.
I love it.
Yeah.
See, that's what you call being with the right people, right? Being in
Yeah.
the right room, right? So
Yeah.
so let's
And I'm
keep going.
glad, Marianne, you brought up the hazing point because, we as a community here, all of us are in some type of work environment, or someone around us, we might notice that we could help better. And so if you notice the hazing, I mean, this gets into a whole other topic, but like, speak up, say something, do something about it.
Ally, be an ally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, an ally, an advocate, like bring it up to say like we want to work together, and we want to bring the
Yeah,
best out in people. And hazing
exactly.
is going to bring out the worst in people. It's not
For
necessarily going
sure.
to bring out the best. So it's like, again, it's that negative mindset loop,
Right.
right? So
Compared to
if
the
we're
positive,
taking
which you
negative
talked
actions, it's going to come back to affect our negative thoughts
about.
and behavior. And so, all right,
So
so
one point is
mindset.
the mindset.
Yeah. So mindset. The next is, okay, how do we take that mindset and focus it in on our strengths?
Okay.
So here's where positive psychology as a discipline. I'm not a psychologist, but I find it fascinating, and because I've grown up in the world of science, there's so much research around the intersection of positive psychology and neuroscience. So, when you
Mhm.
are actually working on tools and techniques to change your mindset, you are
Mhm.
creating new neural pathways in your brain. And fMRI technology is out there proving this. And so, when you're creating those new neural pathways, it becomes easier and easier and more natural to engage in that positive mindset loop and to
Okay.
get those positive results and outcomes you want in your life. So,
So
how
the
do you do it?
consistency of it.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So one of the ways to do it is first to think about, what am I good at? What are my strengths?
Okay.
What are your strengths? And you can identify that yourself, write it down. I can tell you, most people can write down their weaknesses in
Oh,
like
yeah.
a minute
Right.
and have a whole page listed.
Mhm.
But to write down your strengths, if it's something you haven't done, very difficult activity, but a really empowering one to do.
Yeah. And
Um,
can I add to that too,
yeah.
Ashi? When we recognize our strengths, sometimes I think we don't want to feel as though we're boasting or we're bragging, right? And what
Mm,
we're really doing is we're acknowledging something, our strengths, to help us have the confidence that we need to
yes.
get rid of that imposter monster, right?
Such a great point. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is an exercise to do for yourself. If you're not ready to put it out there and share it with the world because you're
Mhm.
afraid of that boasting or whatever, and that's a whole other talk we can talk
Yeah.
about, like the
Yeah.
spectrum of imposterism, confidence, and
Right.
ego and
Right.
arrogance. But yeah, it's an activity, you do it yourself. You can ask others around you to say, hey, where do you see my strengths? Like, what do you see my strengths are, to add on to that? There's also a strengths assessment you can take with Gallup. I'm a strengths certified coach. I give
Mhm.
these assessments all the time. I work with individuals. You can connect with me to do it. You can also go on Gallup's website directly, pay the
Yeah.
fee, get a strengths assessment, get a report that shows you what your strengths are.
Yeah. Very
So,
effective.
so that's like one of the first steps in developing that strengths mindset is, what are my strengths? The
And I
second
just
is,
I just want to tell you,
yeah,
Asha, we have about 2 more minutes. So
yeah. So I'll go quickly through this.
yeah, I won't
So
interrupt
this,
you.
yeah, the second is thinking about those strengths, and this is just, this is one way to do it, is where do those strengths show up for me? And so now you're really starting to accept and honor that it is showing up for me. And if it's showing up for me, what the third point being, what are the achievements that I'm gaining from this? I talk a lot about, if you followed me through the years, this concept of a brag book. And I use the word brag intentionally, which is write out anything you would want to truly brag about. What are those achievements and accomplishments you've had? And where have you seen your strengths in play? And then lastly, I'll say, I look at my strengths every day. I have a little post-it note on my laptop that I refer to these terms, and they're based on the Clifton Strengths terms of strengths. And I look at them, I honor them, I think about them as I'm like thinking about something maybe challenging I've got to tackle, and what strength do I need to lean in on to tackle that. And so, yeah, wow, there's so much here, but yes, that's thinking about creating a strengths-based mindset. If I can leave you with anything, I'd like to leave you with that.
Ashi, I knew this time would pass too fast, and it has. But here's what I know for sure. I know for sure that our audience today, I'm kind of assuming here, is really happy that they came because we talked about what it is. You gave us levels. We talked about how it impacts people. I love the conversation that we had via the comments that the audience shared, and the final topics that you gave us were in terms of the mindset. everything starts in the mindset. So we choose the way we think, right? What we think about, we bring about, right? You talked about
Mhm.
strengths and remembering our achievements and being okay to acknowledge them. So I think that the information that you shared today has been so valuable, and that you have provided an opportunity for our guests to walk away with understanding more than they knew before. I want to encourage our guests. We have our contact information here. And by the way, this is being recorded, and as soon as we're finished, the recording will be available. I want to encourage you to reach out to us and get in touch with us to see how we can partner with you, help you, and to encourage. I want to also end by this too, saying, as you see other people in your circle are having imposter syndrome, then that's where we can help other people to use the word that Ashi has for the year, be content. Help other people to use my word, shine, because we're a community. We're a community of supporters. So I really want to encourage that. And with that, we have to be respectful about the time. We've got people who are definitely posting comments that they appreciate what we provided today. Excellent points on focusing on your own goals. Nathan said. Danya said it's nice to know that many successful people go through similar emotions, and
Yeah,
no one is
absolutely.
truly alone in how they feel. So I'm going to end it with that. And Asha, if you can stick around for a minute, audience, we want to thank you so much for joining us today, because our commitment, all of us, is to conquer imposter syndrome so that we can achieve our potential. And with that, I thank you, and I'll end the broadcast.
Thank you, everyone.